Here from the Rock Climbing Company. We're just going to do a short segment on placing cams. Okay, cams were an absolute revolution when they came out. They changed the whole sport in climbing, especially trad climbing in particular, because it made areas that we could never protect possible to now protect. So we've talked before about how we place nuts, which are very conventional sort of metal wedges in cracks with good constrictions in, but the cams, they cover a slightly different shape of crack. So with a cam, you can see it moves, so there's definitely some moving parts, then things to consider. What we really want to be able to do is place a cam in a parallel sided crack. Okay, so when a cam is placed, we're looking to fit it into a relatively smooth side on both sides that's fairly matching. Okay, it's possible to have a slight wave to each of the cracks, but the more you wave, the harder it is to then get the cam to seat well. I've got cams from this sort of size range all the way down to this sort of size. So yeah, very, very small. So you can see there's a huge variety of crack sizes that you can cover with the cams. They are more expensive than nuts, but they help protect routes that you could just not protect with nuts. Okay, so I'm looking at a crack sequence around me here. It's got a few different sizes and shapes. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to be looking to use a bit of a tip again about how big my hand is. So if I can get my whole hand in, I'm looking into the medium size. If I can get my whole arm in and start moving my arm around, I'm looking into this larger sizes. If I can't even get my fingertips in, I'm looking at this really small size range. Okay, so I'm going to be looking somewhere in the middle. They're all color coded, which makes a big difference when it comes to finding the size that you want. So I'm going to start with a red size here. You can see if I pull the trigger, if I pull one side of the trigger, it pulls one side of the cam. If I pull the other side, it pulls the other side of the cam. Okay, so when I place it, I want to pull each side equally at the same time. Okay, I don't want to be just pulling on one side, I want to pull equally. Okay, a little tip is that when you go to place this into the crack, in whichever orientation you're placing it, you want to have it with still have a little bit of range remaining to be able to get it out. So if you shoved it in a bit too hard, when the trigger's retracted all the way, it's going to be very hard for you to remove that because there's no way for you to make that cam any smaller. So when you're placing it, just have a little bit of range left so it opens up into the range that you want. And the ideal position for a cam is halfway through its travel. Okay, so this would be completely open and this would be completely closed. Okay, many people call this being overcammed. Okay, and many people will class this as being very undercammed. Okay, so we're looking for somewhere in the middle of that range, and we want each side to be as symmetrical as possible to each other. So we don't want one that's fully engaged and one that isn't engaged. Okay, we want to have an equal balance in the trigger. So when I'm placing this, I place it a little bit like a nut. I sort of feed it in gently. I don't just shove. I feed it in gently, drop it in, and I'm trying to get it into a nice gentle position. Okay, I'm not being very aggressive with the cam. I'm trying to be very gentle. So you can see there how it's got good contact on each side, and both the top and the bottom are under equal camming tension. Okay, you do see sometimes people really going to town and trying to tug on these a bit like they do with the nuts to seat them, but these only really require a very gentle pull to seat. That's all you really need to do. So it's very easy for me to get this in and out. I don't need to seat it because of the material that's on the cam. It's designed to grip. Okay, so if I just give it a slight tug, that should be all it needs. Okay, so one little tug so that the cam's not moving. You'll notice if I move this cam upwards or downwards, you can see it starts to move. Okay, so if you're in a position where the crack is very deep and it could push out all the way just by an inwards force, you want to be very careful about how that cam is going to move while you're climbing. So if I've placed this cam as part of my route as I'm climbing up, I'm going to need to be very sure that I've extended this enough with an appropriate sized quick draw. So if I have to use one of my extendable quick draws, I would just pass that into the sling and I would then extend my quick draw. So then there's no way I can move up and down on that, and you can see the cam is unaffected. Okay, so don't be afraid to overextend cams a little bit more than you would with a nut, okay? But the cam is what's good here, is that it's going to stay in place as long as it's extended appropriately. They are incredibly strong, you know, very comparable to the strength of a nut in the same way. But like anything, it's only as good as the quality in which you've placed it. So if the rock quality is poor, but the placement looks good, well, you can't give that a 5 out of 5, okay? Because the rock would be the weaker part of that system. So when we've placed it, we're taking into account everything, okay? I see people regularly placing a cam in a deep crack like this, but on one side it's a good strong piece of rock, on the other side it's almost like a boulder or a chockstone, and you can just put enough force on that with my body weight to pull on that, and you'll see that whole boulder start to flex, okay? So the cam can exert a lot of force to keep itself in. When it comes to getting these out, okay, it's very simple again. We need to reach for the trigger, retract a little bit, not all the way, and then feed it out, okay? Sometimes the feeding out will come from the center, from below, from above, from the side, okay? But what's important is that we don't just pull as hard as you can and shove it in. That's not what you want to be doing. You want to be delicate with the cam while you're placing it to get it into the crack, get it positioned where you want, and then a slight gentle pull to seat, and then you can clip in with your sling or your rope. That's all you need. Okay, best of luck. We'll see you soon.